The evening's display, very straightforward, so let's get on with that, is Glen giving us Nicaragua postal stationery, the CBIC era, 1890 to 1899. Over to you then, Glen, and thank you. You muted yourself?
Unmute yourself, Glen, that's it.
Yeah, sorry, I was following your instructions. It's up for you guys in particular because you're all high-powered philatelers. I had to come early from work, so it's only 4 o'clock over here. So thank you very much. All right, I'll share my screen and hopefully everyone will see my PowerPoint presentation. Is everyone good with that?
Yep.
And
that's good.
Can everyone see my cursor so I can point to various things? Is my cursor?
Yep, no, that's good, John. That's good.
All right.
Glen.
Well, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure when someone invites you to talk about your passion, which is philatelics. But when it's what you actually collect, it's always a great thing. So thank you very much. I do appreciate. I plan this session to go for about an hour, and I'm happy for you to send many questions to Frank, and we'll deal with them as we come along. So I thought I'd just go through, I'm going to talk about Nicaraguan postal stationery, the CBEC period. So I'll just do a bit of an introduction, what was there before CBEC. I'm going to talk a little bit about the man CBEC. I'm going to talk about the contract that he took out with Nicaragua and how this all came about. And one of his die makers, Lobenheimer, I'm going to talk a bit about him as well because he was a discovery that I made in 2015. And then I'm going to go through all the stationery items I have from CBEC, which is the envelopes, wrappers and postal cards. On the right-hand side, you can see there's a cartoon done by Elliot. He was a famous cartoonist for our local rag called the Daily News, which never really survived too much. And this was when it was drawn on my 30th birthday, and I sell medical x-ray equipment. So you can see there's a little safety pin holding a radiation badge below my belt. I used to wear flares in those days and something called desert boots. So I used to wear black desert boots, always had a tie, always had a gut. So that's who I am. As you see me, that's what you get. All right, so before the CBEC period, so we're talking 1890 to 99, all the stationery was actually done by American Banknote Company. So the first postal card that came out, which I'm showing you there, came out in 1878. The Nicaraguan didn't join the UPU until May of 1882. So the postal card was really just for domestic use. And one of the key things is because it was a Central American country, they had relationships with the surrounding countries that they would pay the domestic rate in and out of those countries. So not only was this postal card good for Nicaragua, it was also good to send to Honduras, El Salvador, etc. So once they joined the UPU, their first 3 centavo or international postal card came out in 1884. Then they had a new design in 1888, and the very first postal envelope came out in 1888. So all done by American Banknote Company. All right, so the man, Nicholas CBEC, when I first heard of him, it was all bad terms. Everyone had bad mouth Nicholas CBEC, and I asked, what did he do so wrong? And the stories have gone down so far down line, people have actually forgotten what he's actually responsible for. And in fact, I think he's had a bad rap. So part of presenting it as the CBEC period is not just the fact that he manufactured these, but why he went about it, etc., and who were some of the villains, not so much CBEC. So this is a photograph of Nicholas CBEC when he was 23. And by that age, he was already established as a stationer and a printer. And he also was a part-time stamp dealer as well. So that's where his interest was in printing stamps, because he was a stamp dealer. So he was born in 1859 in Hanover in Germany, mother and father. They immigrated to the US at about 1866. And once he got once he started his working life, he moved to New York in 1872, and he opened up his very first stationery business. and that was at 3 Vesey Street. So when we were in New York in 2016, I went down to 3 Vesey Street. There's the actual intersection there. And lo and behold, there is a stationery store still on that same area. Whether it's the same building, I don't know. But behind me is the memorial for 9/11. So this corner is not far. In fact, this whole building was covered in rubble and dust during the 9/11 episode. So just give you a perspective. So this is on Island, close to Wall Street. So here's a card from Nicholas showing that he was basically a stationer. He was a general engraver. He did lithographs, he did printing, and he was a manufacturer of blank books or diaries. But on the right-hand side, you can see that he actually promotes that, you know, he does postage stamps, and he was a collector, there's albums, etc. So this sort of gives us an indication that as a stationer, he was selling stamps. But by 1876, he actually published his first catalogue. It was mainly American stamps, which he sold to other dealers where they could actually put their own name on. So this was really a generic catalogue that he used for his own customers, but he would print it for other dealers and actually advertise their names on it as if it was their catalogue as well. So he was obviously very entrepreneurial, you know, way back in the early days. So around 1878, late 1870, sorry, yeah, 1878, 79, he traveled to the Dominican Republic, and he actually signed up a contract to say, look, you know, you're having trouble getting good stamps. I can print those for you. Let's give it a go. So he signed up a contract with those guys. He also did the Colombian state of Bolivia as well. So that was his first introduction to actually printing stamps for another country. So he then went on and saying, well, look, all these Central and South American countries are all having problems, paying for stamps and getting them produced. So he had this great idea that what I'll do is I'll print them for you. I'll supply them to you free of charge. And what we'll do is at the end of a period, we'll demonetize them. You send them back to me, I'll give you some new stamps. So it costs you nothing. And then because they're demonetized, I can sell them under face value. And that would help the collectors, you know, develop a nice collection. So I'm just showing here, he did a 10-article contract with Nicaraguan. So the first part of the article is, I'm going to supply all your stationery. He did stamps as well, but in this case, stationery, free of charge. So I'll print it, I'll produce it, I'll deliver it to you in time, and it's all free of charge. So on the proviso that every year he'll produce a new issue, and the previous issue then gets demonetized. So in that way, he can then on-sell it to other dealers to sell below face or at face. So there's some money to be made. He also had guarantees that he'll have the whole shipment ready by the 15th of November before the year that new stamp started. So they were never going to be out of postage stamps. And the reason for doing that is these guys didn't have a holiday on January 1. Come January 1, that's when the postage stamps were available. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, it didn't matter. So, and there were some major post offices, but there was a lot of regional post offices that may have taken weeks to get those stamps up there. So that was part of the deal. The fourth article, he actually says, I'm going to give you beautiful works of art, which I believe he did. And it's all going to be steel engraved of the highest quality. Well, he sort of let them down a little bit because he really found, especially for stationery, it's easier to make them, you know, litho than it is steel engraved, and they're not going to know the difference because, you know, they're Central Americans. So that's probably the only part of the contract that I felt that he wasn't truthful on. But anyway, that's how it was. So for compensation, so Article 5, for compensation of the free delivery, it basically, he said, just send me the leftover stock by February, so then I can start moving them on. And what he did do is he didn't sell them himself directly to the public. He had a couple of agents that he would sell them to, and then they would on-sell them to other stamp dealers. And really, this is where the bad rep come. CBEC did all the right thing by the country. got the equipment back, and then all of a sudden, where they were on sold, really, that's where all the shenanigans went on by. So he did say, look, I'm going to have all the dies. So if I can't fulfill all the orders, I want the right to reprint any or all of the stuff that I give you. Now, the first couple of years, there was really no need, but towards the end of the contract, reprinting really got out of hand because those dealers that were saying to Nicholas Seebeck, oh, our demand outstrips, you've got to keep sending us stuff. So that's, I think, where the reputation, really played up. Also, he didn't want Nicaragua to compete with the stamp dealers. So if they had a bulk rate for any business, it couldn't be any more than a 10% discount, because what they didn't want is, because they got the stamps for free, and some big business, maybe a coffee bean plantation, said, look, give us a discount for 10,000 stamps and sell it to them at 50%, then they could be competing with the stamp dealers. So that was part, that the actual discount maximum that they could give. The other thing is the 10 peso stamp, 10 pesos was a lot of money back then, was used for telegrams, and all of the telegram forms had to be destroyed. So there is actually no legitimate usage of 10 pesos unless you've got a telegram form that hasn't been destroyed. But if you look in many collections, there's plenty of 10 peso stamps with beautiful cancellations on, and all of these are forgeries, unfortunately. The stamps aren't forgeries, but all are postmarks, because the demand for the philatelists back in those days was, used set of every stamp that came out in the world. So there was a big demand for all of that. Now, there was, again, if the Seebeck didn't actually deliver on time, they had a get out clause, which every contract should have, and they could then cancel the contract. If they ran out of stamps or stationery, they could reorder up to 1 million pieces, and that could have been in any combination. In fact, there was more than enough, because the country population was about 250,000, and there was only about 82,000 registered voters at that time. And I would say the registered voters were the educated people that could actually write. So there wasn't a huge demand for the stamps internally. And that this contract would last 10 years. And in fact, this contract did last 10 years. So the Seebeck contract, according to Higgins and Gage, and my catalogue's 1978, is that there's 41 envelopes were produced in that 10 years time. There was 26 wrappers and 40 postal cards. And I'm going to go through each of those at the end of all of this. So about 2015, the Lebenheimer family, so the grandson of Rudolf Lebenheimer, decided to sell all his archive material, and all this proofs and archives of all this stationery came onto the market, and we weren't even aware who was the actual die maker. And by having the archives put up for sale, we were able to track this down to Lebenheimer. And in the 50s, there used to be a journal that would actually document all the die makers for all the different printing houses, whether it be for banknotes or stamps or for books, etc. And he was actually in those journals quite often, but actually no mention of him producing any of these proofs, etc. So this is a recent discovery. So I just wanted to touch base a little bit on this guy. He was German, born in 1833. So at the age of 17, he moved over to the US and got employed by a printer, John Hoyles Senior, the business was, as an engraver. And even at an early age, he was a bit of an artist. And when he was coming over by a ship, he actually was making money on the ship by drawing caricatures of everybody on the ship. So he was quite a talented person. So by 58, he decided to start his own business as a die maker and a metal maker. I put down here he got married in 63, and the reason is he had 5 sons, but only one of them survived past the age of 12. And his son went on to also be a die maker and worked for American Banknote Company. And then obviously his son, who's the one that put all this archive material through the Kelleher auction in 2015 up for sale. And of course, Rudolph actually got American citizenship in 1866, living the dream. I just wanted to show you something that I did find, just to show the quality of his die making was highly sought after. So this is a set of postal envelopes done in the US by George Ray, and he actually had Lobenheimer to actually make all of the dies. And the postmaster at the time, so he was the third assistant, so third highest in the post office, actually wrote to Rudolph, and this is the letter that he wrote. And the bit that I like to show you is that, you know, dear sir, the dies executed by you for the new series of stamped envelopes are so beautifully and faithfully executed, I cannot refrain from expressing the high appreciation. And for an American, that to go out and write that really impressed him. So we know the quality of Lobenheimer's work is of first rate. And one of the things that Seebeck did say, that he would have high quality stamps, high quality stationery, and because that starts with the die maker. So that's why I thought it was interesting to introduce the die maker at this time. So I'm a member of the Nicaraguan study group. So Ross Towle and myself, upon this discovery, wrote an article about Rudolph Lobenheimer. I also did a couple of articles to the Postal Stationery Society of Australia, and I'll show you those at the moment. I just wanted to point out that the Nicaraguan study group is a member of 56 members dedicated to the research in philately of Nicaraguan philately. Currently, I'm the president, just recently appointed 12 months ago. The previous president was president from 1996. And like any committee position, you can only give up that position if you can find a sucker, an interested body to go over. So it took him 5 years to convince me to take over the role, and I'm hoping that it doesn't last for another 25 years like his did. So anyway, that's a bit of a wrap for that. This publication, the Nicaraguan, is done by a guy called Michael Schreiber, who used to be the editor for Scott's magazine, the philatelic magazine that Scott's put out. And he has really lifted our standard of publication, and it's highly sought after. So here's just the two issues that I wrote the articles on. So the first one was The Man, which was done on the February edition in 2017. And then I actually eventually got as many of the proofs that I could buy and as I could afford, and wrote an article of those proofs that he did for them. All right, so let's introduce you to the stationery. So we're starting with the envelopes. Now, up the top left-hand corner, you can see this is three of the proofs that I got from the family archives. As you can see that these are beautifully engraved, and this is without value and this is with value. These were steel engraved, and you can tell, you can actually feel them, but look at them on the envelopes, they're flat. So you know that straight away, these are lithographic done procedures. Now on the bottom left-hand corner, you can see the actual numbers that they supplied. So the 5 centavo, which was the domestic rate, they produced 100,000. 10 centavo, which was the international rate for less than 15 grams or half an ounce. And then 20, 30, and 50, which I regard as business size, so multiples of 15 grams going domestic or international. They only sent them 500 of each because they didn't think there was going to be a big demand for this. So those numbers are quite low. And one of the things I did get from the UPU wrote to each of the UP countries saying, you're going to get a set of stamps and postal stationery from various countries. And this is what you're going to get. And typically they would send 3 of everything to each country. And I think around this time, there was about 72 countries in the UPU. So 3 times of everything you produce. However, if you look down the bottom of it, where it says 3 on the left-hand side, and all of a sudden it starts to say 1, 1, and 1. And these are for the peso stamps because they really weren't going to be used for local postage, and also for the business envelopes. So that also gives you an idea that there wasn't a lot of these around. So from that UPU circular, We know that they for the postal stationery, they sent to every UPU country 3 each of the 2 cents and the 2 cents reply card, the 3 centavo, the 3 centavo reply card, 3 each of the 5 and 10 centavo envelopes, 3 each of the wrappers, 1, 2 and 4 cent, and also only 1 each of the 20, 30 and 50. Just going back to the actual envelopes, there is no recorded usage of these business envelopes. So the big thing that we're chasing is always usage of the business envelopes. And we meticulously document every one that we find on the market. Very few, and we're able to record, and we know who owns each of those. So here we are, the 5 centavo envelopes. You can see it's nicely blue. This top one actually has specimens, so that's what CBEC or Hamilton Banknote Company printed on these and sent these to the UPU countries. This is a mint one, and here you can see the first. It goes to Guatemala. So this should be a local rate and shouldn't be taxed at all because it's correct. So I believe it's being taxed because it was over 15 grams. And they're pretty officious about weight in these days. So that just gives you a sample. On the 10 centavo, which was used for 15 grams for international rate anywhere else in the world, there's specimens and showing you some usage. One of the things is the knives and the gums. I've been doing study on these, and they're not the same within each of the issues. And once we start looking at where they get reprinted, often the reprints have different gums or different knives. So it's a study that very few people have done, and it's one that the group is doing. So I just highlight. So even the same knife of envelope basically has different gumming, as you can see in this gumming. Up on the 5 centavo, it doesn't want to stick down to the hollow here. And because in the 10 centavo, they're going international, so who really cares? They can stick on top of it quite nicely. Newspaper wrappers. Again, these are very hard to find used, and each of these are documented. You can see the actual indicia is similar to what they use on the envelopes, except for those who have noticed there's no hump up here. So the only difference between wrappers and envelopes, if I just go back to the envelope, as you can see, there's a little hump on the envelopes. And when it comes to the actual wrappers, there's a straight line. So we know that each of these dies are for the wrappers. They're not for the envelopes at all. Now, these specimens, this hand stamped specimen is not uncommon with Hamilton banknotes, and these were used for salesman samples. So Nicholas Seebeck or any of the salespeople going around the world trying to get contracts would show these off as the quality of work. So these aren't UPU specimens. So if you see these described as UPU, they're wrong. I actually had quite a few of these hand stamps in a display, and Steve Schumann said, no, this is not legitimate, we'll pull it out. So I had to get Brian Morehouse to do a certificate. So each of these cost me a fortune just to say that they're nothing special and they're quite legitimate. So very nice. Thank you to Steve for I could have bought something else with that. So 1891. So again, these were produced every year. So here's the next lot that came out. And as you can see, the trial proof. So this was the indicia used for the stamps as well as the envelopes. However, the stamps were still recessed. Again, the business envelopes and the envelopes were lithographed. So it's a bit disappointing because when you look at this quality, it's fantastic. And when you look at it on the envelope, it's not. And I think when you're looking at the 1890s, it wasn't an area that people, A, wanted to collect, and B, businesses really cared about quality. However, the Scots, when they made their catalogue for Nicaraguan, had to have cutouts. So most people bought these envelopes so they could cut out and mount it in their Scots album or their Minx album. So there was still a high demand for them, but it was mainly for cutouts, not for the envelopes themselves. Again, no known usage in these business envelopes. We're now starting to see, as we're researching in the group, that there was actually 2 different envelope types and there's 2 different knife types as well. Were they supplied as a reorder? I don't know. Were they reprints to be sold at the market? Very possible. The only way I'm going to prove to myself if it was genuine intent to fill up an order is once we start seeing usage, but it's hard to find usage at the best of times. So to prove something does take a while. We also found in the other 5 centavos, so this is, of course, blue on yellow, this is blue on cream, that up on the top right-hand corner, there's a sharp edge on one envelope and there's a chamfer on the other. So it even means that the die had changed subject to doing the reprint. So this sort of leads us to believe that these reprints were made for the philatelic market. But again, if I can find one that's been legitimately used, then that would put an end to that speculation. What I do like is publishing stuff that I have a theory on and I'm pretty sure I'm right, and then having 30 people write to me and saying, I've got something to prove that that's wrong. And I think that's one reason to actually write articles. And those people that don't write anything are missing out on the research, free research that you get from everyone. All right, so 1891 still on. And as you can see here, again, lithograph, poor quality, but there is very few of these generally used. There are CTOs around, and I think they were par favor, and they were for a couple of German people that got them, but the majority of the ones that are used, there's very few known. And as you can see, only 3 of these wrappers known, only 3 of these wrappers known. And in both cases, I have 2 of the 3. So I've made my mission to own most of the used wrappers. And there's someone that I forget, is it Michael? Somebody does an eBay search on wrappers. None of these wrappers are bought on eBay. You have to buy them in major auction houses. So in 1892, again, you can see this is a litho pull from the Leibenheimer archives. So I know that he designed these. Again, business envelopes. We now have one, and I was lucky I found it in Prague in 2017 in a dealer's box. And why would someone in Prague have one? Because it was a German dealer, and a lot of the coffee plantation owners were German, and correspondence would go back to Germany. So the group now, and that's me in particular, has found a 30 centavo business envelope. So it's actually quite exciting when you get these finds. I'm just going to quickly go through these. So 1892, again, the 5 centavo domestic and international. Just showing here that I'm starting to see the reprints starting to happen more regularly here. I think there's 2 color variations and there's 2 different sizes. So it's possible on 2 separate occasions that these were made for dealers. And most of these have been cut into, not left whole, but actually made cutouts. And I've got an album with several hundred of each of these in beautifully cut out that somebody's collected over a period of time. And here's one that's been uprated, and you can see that it's the stamp indicia for the wrapper is different from the stamp. So not every year did they have the same, but typically they had the same subject. These were a mystery to me until we found this lithographic pull out of the Leibenheimer archive. So these are actually done by Leibenheimer as a essay, but never actually got used for 1893. So Nicholas Seebeck decided his in-house design for stamps would be the ones that they'd put on the postal stationery. So Rudolph didn't actually get to do all of the engraving, but he did all of the stationery engraving that wasn't of stamp design indicia. Just going back, so these are composite black proofs, and each of them have numbers on which relates to the die. And what was interesting with Seebeck, American Banknote Company took over Seebeck when it died. All the dies went to them, and they renumbered all the dies that they owned from 1924 onwards. So all these dies have various numbers, but American Banknote from about 1924 started their die numbers from 50,001, 50,002 to document all the dies. However, there was an organisation in the 30s that were against Seebeck and the material out that demanded those dies from the American Banknote and then physically destroyed them all. So there's no way there can be any more reprints. So it's quite a sad time when people go to great extents to just, you know, destroy the dies that are in archives. So these are the business envelopes. Again, the wrappers, and as you can see, only 5 known, only 7 known here. The 1894, again, this was the same as this was the plate proof for the stamps, and also they use exactly the same for the envelopes. Still, quantities being shipped were very minimal, as you can see, still only 500 of each of these business envelopes. Now showing usage. Now, this is the first time that a wrapper actually had a watermark. So I've just reduced the watermark, but this was through all 3 of these. This is the first and last time that they used watermark paper, and I've never seen this watermark, so I don't know where the stock came from. So as anything, there's always more questions than answers every time you research something. So there's another area that we need to work hard on to find out where that watermark paper came from. Again, some more Lobenheimer archives. As you can see, the proofs here, these business envelopes. Now, I put this in my display and I get penalised saying you shouldn't put a business envelope, you shouldn't put any envelopes with missing stamps. But since there's only a couple of these known, what options do you have? So you just hope the judges actually read that there's only a couple of these around and believe you, or do the research and not criticise. Because until I can find another one, that one stays there. And just to give you an idea, I'm paying about $1,500 US for these envelopes. So even when you do find them, they're not cheap to buy. Now we start to see marked difference in quality of the ink and the paper used for the original and reprints. And so the only way you can tell which one's original is find usage, and then you know the other one's the reprint. Again, more usage, and a lot of these going to Germany. This is the 1895 coat of arms. One thing I found is we've got an angled die, and we think it's a 1, so that ends up being the issue. We're not too sure what that is, or whether that's a blank that should have the number 2 or the number 1 in, and that's a blank. So it's a mystery. These aren't uncommon. I think there's about 20 of these around, but there's no used copies to prove that this was issued as 1 centavo wrapper, and maybe it is approved. So there's still more research to be done on this. Again, as you can see, 9 known, 8 known. So as this is going along, we're finding more and more, and I think more of these CBEC issues started to get used later on, closer to the 1900s. So in 1896, there was a bit of a change that they started to then use the same indicia, but actually put the year in it. So this die was used for both 1896 and 1897. The values are the same, the colours are the same, and the only thing different was the actual year that's slated in here. Another business envelope, again, only 5 known. At least this one doesn't have a missing stamp. It is creased because what did they do with businesses when they sorted all these? They folded all their business envelopes. So that's the best you can get. The thing that I really like about this one is it's Bluefield. So for those who know anything, it's on the Mosquito Coast, and you know, very hard to get stuff from Bluefield. Again, the 10 cents and the paper wrappers with the same indicia. So here we go, 1897, typically exactly the same. These are original and a reprint, and the date is 1897 in these. And these are some of my favourite covers when they uprate them and they're both registered, and you know, they're going overseas. I always admire finding covers, and very hard to get this type of cover. Another rare business envelope, only 5 known, as you can see, missing stamp here, missing stamp there. So what I'm really doing is all those international judges listening in, like Bernie's probably going to criticise me next time they see this exhibit. But as you say, So there's only 5 of these known. So you get what you can. Again, for the wrappers, and as you can see here, most wrappers are flat. In this case, they curved it and they gummed it, which is not always what they did for most of these things. And as you can see, more usage of these newspaper wrappers. And getting towards the end of the envelopes, again, a nice business one. This is the only one known of this one, and it's always nice when you have the only known one. Wasn't cheap either. This is an interesting time because I've got it up here as the Greater Republic of Central America. So it's in Spanish, of course. It doesn't actually say that. It says that in Spanish. So Zelaya, the president at the time, thought the United States getting too powerful. Why don't the 5 of us, the 5 countries in Central America, get together and try to be a power within the Americas to compete against United States? And so the 5 countries signed on. This agreement lasted about 18 months because the equivalent to the CIA in the US decided we can't have someone more powerful than us on the continent. So they did their Whispers campaign where they went into each of the countries and said, you know what Zelaya is saying about you, you know what the other president's saying about you. And before you know it, with all these rumors floating around, the whole thing just fell apart. But for at least 18 months, El Salvador and Nicaragua honoured the agreement by putting the Greater Republic of Central America on their stamps and on their postmarks as well. So not only is collecting stamps interesting in the product itself, but the history that goes with it just always amazes me. And this is getting up to 1898. And there is usage of 1899, but I haven't put it in there. But 1899 was the last of the envelopes and also the postal cards. And the reason is because the contract ran out, but also Nicholas Seebeck died of tuberculosis late in 1899. So there was no one else to sign a new contract. Nicaragua did go around looking for companies to offer that. There was a couple of companies tried to do it, but when they found out they were losing money, they quickly pulled out. So I'm just going to go finally through the postal cards. These are beautifully designed. What I have here is 2 of the 5 known and now 6 known. I called them colour trial proofs because they're actual proofs, but of different colours that weren't used. And this one, I picked this one up about 3 months ago, and somebody's putting in here an error, and I think they're putting it as a colour error because this colour is the colour of the 3 centavos, not the 2. So we're still finding stuff out there. This one here I bought for €1,000 from Gartner. It was described as 500 postal cards, mainly of the 80s, and they mean 1980s. And this was in the bottom of it saying something wrong with this card, it's the wrong color. So it's amazing what you can pick up by just buying bulk lots. So again, these are my favorites because, you know, I think this is beautifully designed. They've gone to a lot of work to produce these cards, and you can see Hamilton Banknote Company is at the bottom of each of these. So here's the hand stamped specimens that I showed that he would go around and show. This is the true color of the 2 centavos, and this is the so that's the local card and adjacent states, and then 3 centavos. And also they had reply cards for both 2 and 3 centavos. And the challenge is to actually find a reply card that's gone to Germany and come back as a reply card. Never seen one. So when you open up the reply cards, they look like this. So both the standard cards and the reply cards. The only difference is with the reply cards, they actually have reply paid in Spanish on the second card, and they're joined together. One of the things that also we've recently discovered is there's actually a plate flaw. So just down here, there's a break in the line. So I've just highlighted it here with a break. And this is a mint card, but I've also got one that's used. So this was sent over and undetected. What we don't know is how many cards were produced in a run, even though these were done at lithos. Was there 8 on the stone? Was there 16? Was there 12? We have no information on, and we're still researching. Here I've got a 3 centavo card that hasn't been guillotined right. So there's definitely cards being printed to the left and I assume to the right of it. So it would make me believe that it's at least 3 rows of something, more like 4 rows. Now, I have to put this one up because I got this yesterday. I was so excited. 6 months ago, we found the first proof of this 3 centavos, and I thought it's the only one. So I hunted high and low in every auction, every catalogue, everything I knew to see if I could find one, because I didn't have one. And I actually found this one at an auction house and bid for it. Just to show you a couple of things, the surround is actually filled in, which it's not filled in here. And you can see the 3-line address is not on here as well. But what you do notice is these are very sharp. This is steel recess produced, where this is litho. And look at the colors difference, just chalk and cheese between the two. And because these were done as individuals, you can see this has been scissor cut. So each of the proofs that I showed previously actually are scissor cut, where these are all guillotined. So I haven't had time to do much more other than put it up. So this new discovery is new discovery as I've received it yesterday. So you might be able to tell I'm a little bit excited about that card. So only crazy philatelists would get excited about a bit of paper, right? Oh, the other thing is this card is about half the thickness of the finished product. So I've got to do some research on the card as well. So now we're going to 1891. Again, I think beautifully produced. You know, Seebeck, Nicholas Seebeck did stick to that part of the contract. I think you can't argue about the quality of what they issued. Just the printing is a bit, you know, what it was like. Now, these reply cards are sent to Germany, and this is typically what you'll find is when you turn this over, there's a letter from the top to the bottom. It was never ever going to be used as reply, but a cheap way of sending a whole letter to Germany for just 6 centavos. I mean, it's amazing. And some of them I've got is they write one way, they turn the card 90 degrees, and then they write again a second line. So there's actually 2 lots to get 5 or 6 paragraphs on one card. So talking about getting the most out of it. And just recently purchased one where someone attempted to do them on 45 degrees. So actually 3 lots of writing on the same back card. So, but see them generally used as reply back from Germany. No one has ever seen one. Again, here is a miscut. As you can see, here is the Hammer banknote writing here, and this is upside down. So I'm pretty sure that these were printed test by test, you know, basically upside down. And I've got no other way of proving it except for I had a look at Michael Ho's Honduras, and here they've got the reply cards which are done like this, and then so this is a proof of a Honduras card. So it's possible that either these were printed as standard and then a reply card which started there upside down, or they did test by test singles on it. So we really are needing to find out how these things were printed. Oh, and thank you to Mike. I wanted a scan, but he doesn't know how to scan, so I had to take a photograph to get that up. Again, reply cards used as single usage and not sending reply. Cancel cards were also sent as printers samples. So that was the same as putting specimen. They just put cancelled on it if they were shipping it out. This is the first time they actually, I think you call it rouletted, or actually put dots on rather than scoring the reply cards, and they never did it after that. So there must be some effort to actually produce those on the reply card. And this is not uncommon from what I heard. These cards they've been crossed out as postage because they've got German field post on, and these were done in World War One, so it was free postage to the field post. Did they get a block of Nicaraguan cards from a dealer and send them out to the troops, or did the troops just raid various houses for whatever they could to write back home, and this just happened to come out of a poor stamp collector's collection? Who knows? But it's another interesting story. In the 1893 postal cards, typically this has been uprated and not used as a reply card. These are overseas. So this tardy is late postage. Now this is one that we know definitely got reprinted, because in the beginning it says Hamilton banknote, Inch, and so it looks like engraver and printing, New York. And then with the next lot, it's got Hamilton Banknote Company, New York. So they dropped the Inch and PTG, which I believe is engraving and printing. So these are definitely two separate, and there's usage on both of these. So my guess is in 1893, postal cards started to get popular, and they did require more than the 20,000 that they first got issued. And these were also issued as stamps, so this is the proof of the stamps. Ian McMahon always say, don't ever put stamp proofs with your stationery, but I do like to show where these indicias come from. Again, now for the 3 centavo, the overseas rate, clearly you can see the ancient PTG no longer on the second ones here. And there's usage on both of those. One thing is, so this usage was around June. This is January, so this is the first lot that came out. So possibly halfway through the year is a good indication of when that second printing was made. And this is an actual reply card that's gone to Sydney, New South Wales. I've never had a destination from Nicaragua at this time, so this is the only one that I know that's gone to Sydney. So I wonder who this guy is and what his connection was to Nicaragua. It'd be quite interesting. So it's always nice to find unusual destinations, and rarely does people say Australia is unusual destination. Again, so 1895, the coat of arms, postal card and a reply card showing usage. Here's one. This is really a CTO, nothing written on the back. And I think this Max Pinter's was a bit of a collector, because it's often stuff. And he seems to live in various places in Central America, because he's had this stuff delivered to various places. Coat of arms again showing usage, showing international usage. So in Higgins and Gage, this is about the only variety that they actually show on the reprint of this one. So all those other varieties that we've shown have been discovered in the last 10 or 15 years through the study group. But this one's actually in the Higgins and Gage. So the reprint actually shows it's the amount of shading. If you can see over on the one card A, there's plenty of shading around, where here it's been reduced. You can see on the left-hand side here, it's just a little bit sticking out, where here's quite a bit. So it's the shading around that distinguishes these two printings. And there's usage on both of these. So obviously this was discovered early on in the piece for Higgins and Gage to actually put it in as a type A and B. Again, showing reply cards of 1896, and they use the indicia here, and it's the same for 1897 with just the date change. 1896, 1897, same indicia, just date change, and same floor. So obviously they kept both plates and just changed the year. Again, showing usage. One that we found just recently is the frame. Not too many people go and check the frames on each of their cards, but there's actually a different alignment on these two. So this new discovery is really, and we've found usage on this as well. So this is probably a reprint, or we don't know which one would be the original. So we've got January on both of them. So now again, that Greater Republic of Central America, these are composite proofs of the stamps, which were also used for the postal cards. And that the image is the port of Corinto, where most of the mail came in and out through steamships. There was 2 printings again of the 1892, and really the difference is on the O for nota. As you can see, this one's a bit squashed and this is a bit round, and you can see the dots in between the T, and the dots are a bit lower down here. So just some insignificant little differences, which then relates to 2 different printings of the same card. Again, same with the 3 centavos for the foreign destination. And this became the last card that got produced in 1899, pretty much having the same image, now using the 1899 indicia, and produced for the international 3 centavo rate as well. Now, because the contract said that once it's finished, they didn't have to return, they kept all the 1898 issues and 1899. And because they were struggling to find someone to print something for free for them so they could carry on another contract, they revalidated these with Habitato, and you can see this is 1904. And they did this for quite a few years. They did get a printer in 1900, didn't last long, so then they've had to go and revalidate these. So, but it shows you they honoured their agreement. Everything up until 1898 got sent back. So 1898, 1899 they kept, and until they ran out, they reused those over multiple years. Again, showing the Habitato here, and again on these stamps. So this is just late usage of these cards. So basically, that's everything I want to share with you. Hopefully it was of some interest, and you can see my passion on postal stationery as well as the Nicaraguan side. So Frank, thank you very much and John for allowing me to present my collection, basically.
All right. Thank you, Glenn. You must have done such a wonderful job. I've got no questions. Come on, guys. Must be something.
No, hang on, Frank. First of all, we've got other things to do before we get onto that. I think we should go to Mark Desirio and ask him to do a vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, John. On behalf of those viewing tonight, it gives me great pleasure to move the vote of thanks to Glen Stafford for sharing with us his International Gold Medal exhibit. The seminal publication about CBEC appears to be by a Danilo A. Moussis, and I'm sure Glenn knows this if the rest of you don't. And it's entitled CBEC Hero or Villain. And I think that pretty much sums up the 2 philatelic camps. As can be seen from the exhibit, Glen is a passionate as well as an avid collector of Nicaraguan postal stationery, and brings a wealth of knowledge and well-honed exhibiting skills to his presentation. And if I can go off script for a moment, I really did enjoy the way Glen presents his material. I think that is something that we should all aspire to get to that level. You wouldn't think that Nicaraguan postal stationery has hitherto been neglected, given Glen's passion and the study group's passion. But it's interesting that apart from the numbers of stationery items that CBEC produced, he produced 128 stamps, 139 officials, 41 postage dues, 66 telegraphs, as well as the numbers that Glen told us about. And as we have understood from the presentation, properly used examples are very hard to find. Again, if I can go off script, to have an envelope used from that period, and having it's common for them to have the stamps taken off. In fact, if the judges know anything, Glen, they should know that most of the time the stamps will be removed. And no offence to judges, but I will continue to exhibit rare stationery without stamps. And like you indicated that. So I can only say more fool a judge who doesn't know his area. You know, it'd be nice if you could find one day, as you found the proof postcard at the bottom of the box, you might buy a bag of used Nicaraguans off covers and find the matching stamps. However, I don't think life's long enough for that quest. I've often thought that with Australian registers, but I think I saw the light very early on. It's interesting to note, and you didn't mention this, but I think you ought to, that CBEC did not produce envelopes and wrappers for 1899. And I think that may explain why Nicaragua thought it didn't have to return anything. Now, it may well be that CBEC by then died, because I think he died in the middle of the year. But I think you would say that is legal tit for tat. He certainly created some very attractive items. There's no doubt about the varieties and the different year sets that you showed us. When you look at the Australian colonials and so on and so forth, they're a pretty ordinary bunch by comparison. I think apart, if I can again, this is quite without real knowledge of your area of study, but I'd like to make a couple of observations. I think it's taken a long time for the philatelic establishment to appreciate CBEC issues. And I think there are two reasons that come to mind. First of all, Nicaragua seems to be a more unlucky place to live than Australia. It had an earthquake in 1932 that totally destroyed the post office archives. I think I saw on the news tonight that there's the remnants of another hurricane that's just gone through. And then apparently about 1949 and 1951, depending on who you believe, the Nicaraguan government required all of CBEC's dies, rolls and cliches to be destroyed. So you're very lucky for Lobenheimer's archives and his 1 out of 5 sons that survived to pass it on to his great or grandson. I think your exhibit shows that CBEC and his issues should not be ignored. The quality of your usage, well, I think was exceptional, probably because most of them have gone outside of the country. And then the ones that did go locally were probably acquired very early on by the Germans, because again, there seems to be a regular hurricane going through and it's tropical. None of them seem to be damaged by the usual ravages of tropical climes. I think they're exceptional in their condition. And I think that when you think about the geography and the history, has to be appreciated even if the judges don't. I think I want to just round off by saying scandalous issues have a way of seeming less so with time. And it took a long time, I think, for a lot of these countries to sort of chase off the philatelic pedigree that they were left. You mentioned the way in which CBEC distributed these, but I think you could be more specific. The real villain in the piece isn't CBEC. The real villain is Gustav Coleman, because he's the one who distributed these to the trade. I do particularly like, and you mentioned this in your exhibit, the cards that were used by the German soldiers. I think they are absolutely unbelievable. And normally you see these sort of things being used by dealers, being, you know, sort of overprinted as a philatelic promotion. But to actually see them used by soldiers in World War I is, at least to me, extraordinary. I hope the judges appreciated those cards. I don't know how on earth well, they were addressed to Germans, so I don't probably need to say anything else, but I'm still surprised they survived World War II, if not World War I. So I would like those of you who have, like me, enjoyed Glen's presentation tonight to join with me to thank him in the usual manner, which means turning on your unmute for a moment.
Mark, thank you very much for all those kind words. I really enjoyed them. I just want to show you one piece of, this is a die that didn't get destroyed at that time. So there's always some things that get put in people's back pockets, obviously, and can be passed on to the collectors.
It's pleasing to know, Glen, that nothing has changed.
And you're right, Gustav, and there was two actual dealers that did all the shonky stuff, and then they on-sold a lot of stuff. One of the things, they was on-selling the spare postal cards to other dealers who would then post it to their clientele with a printed message on the back, buy your stamps from such and such. That got shipped with promise of printing those on there, but of course they didn't print them on, so they never actually got used by those dealers. So there was more shenanigans going on well after CBEC had died with his materials. So
have you ever been able to find any of those?
Yes, Mike Schreiber has actually got a couple of them with dealers' information. Looks like proof. This is what we're going to do for you. You know, you buy 600 or 800 of these, and we'll put your stuff on it, and then you can still have to put US stamps on to send it to your clients, but it'll be in a Nicaraguan and it'll be a CBEC, and that was the whole story. But they never delivered on what they promised, and we only discovered.
It sounds like I would personally put those in an exhibit. Bernie would probably mark you down for that, but that to me rounds it out. Anyway, you don't listen to me when it comes to getting points.
Okay, well, thank you. I think Bernie's a little light underneath Bernie that keeps on flashing, so I don't know whether he's desiring to say something or not.
I'm sure he is after what I've said.
You're on, Bernie, if you wish. I'm afraid the sound, we're not getting you.
All I can is I know a little bit about Savak. For some years, there's a book written by Savak about Italy in Spanish. So whilst I said I read it, it was a little bit like reading Playboy. I looked at the pictures more than the words. Then, just recently, Glen put me on to a guy who has French I agree with, but again, people who wrote it are fishing, trying to find out and put things together, and I still can't understand why Seebeck was so hated by the American philatelic grouping, but he seems to have been. but he's certainly given many hours of joy and pleasure to Glen and also to myself, but also just as much frustration trying to find out what's a reprint when the reprints actually come from the original plate. And that's where the problems come. It's not as simple as it sounds. So it's a great talking point among collectors, and I'm very glad I was able to key in today. This is my second Zoom today. I know John Moore with us tonight, and John and I were on one with the Commonwealth Collectors Club of New York this morning on John Krupnik and the Pan Am flights across the Pacific. So it's not often we do 2 meetings in one day, but that's what you can do now with the time zones. Again,
thank you, Bernie.
Thank you, Frank, for putting it on, and thank you, Glen.
Thank you, Bernie. Frank, any questions come in?
None.
Show, and the Nicaraguan study group came over because the late Derek Pocock was a member of the Nicaraguan study group, so they came over to see him, and they showed me a postal stationery item, and I never knew what a stationery item was, to be honest. This is 2004. So they left me the 1898 Greater Republic of Central America card, and I started reading up about that, and that was interesting. And in the meantime, I found a few more cards, and 16 years later, I've got a gold medal international. That's
Serendipity.
Yep.
I've got one question, Glen.
Yep.
Those print numbers are very small, and
Yep.
yet they're a specimen. So they must have been supplying some of them, or were they done separately, or were they within that print run that they sent to the UPU?
Look, we believe they honoured the contract, or CBEC honoured the contract. The exact numbers went to Nicaragua. They typically, when you're doing millions of stamps, you would just pull out a few hundred and send to the UPU countries, and you wouldn't even worry about it. But since you're sending them, and he had a contract, and they could default on the contract, the 10,000, 5,000, 5,000, 500, 505 is what they got. What he didn't, I believe, wanted to do, print on the higher values, 72 times 3 just to stamps, because they were going to go on telegrams. The UPU countries were never going to see them. So that was his real reason for just sending limited numbers over. So our guess is they're additional too, but on 500, you get another 70. So it'd be a run of 600, and then you'd have some of the ones that are hand stamped specimen for the dealers. So that's our belief.
I'd like to ask a question, if I may.
Sure.
Excuse me, Glen. I'm interested to know whether you speak Spanish, and if you don't, how do you get the translation on the stamps and
okay, so first of all, I don't speak Spanish. In the study group, quite a few people are Spanish, because there's quite a few of them live in America. They speak Spanish. We only have one member of Nicaragua, because stamps don't last long in the humidity over there. So there's not a lot of interest for Nicaraguan philately in Nicaragua, which is the opposite for the Mexican society and the Peru society. They do have large collectors in each of those countries. So
thank you.
Okay, well, I think, Frank, unless there's any...
I think Bernie's got a question.
I can just add to that. Ian, I collect Ecuador. I don't speak Spanish other than things like Tinto Bino or Gracias. But what you'll find is you build relationships with individual collectors. Sometimes you get things in Spanish and another mate will translate it for you. Sometimes we have a group and we have a quarterly journal. Sometimes articles are in English. Sometimes the editor will translate my English article into Spanish. So all I can say is no, because you get people, and most senior collectors and exhibitors actually speak reasonably good English, generally better than American. Sorry, Les, but by and large, you don't have a problem. I have a bigger problem in the Middle East. I don't read Arabic. I can understand the numbers, but that's as far as I can go. But again, you'd be surprised, guys who bend over backwards, even people I do not know, who then send me a translation and say, Bernie, you probably didn't get that. This is what it was saying. So if
Okay.
you love the stuff, there's always someone else to help. And you've got to help back, of course. You can't sit back and just enjoy it. You've got to share your knowledge, as Glen has shared tonight. And, you know, the problem Glen now has is that every attendee tonight sees how interesting Nicaragua is, and he's going to have a lot of other people in the marketplace.
Okay, Stephanie, I think you wanted to say something.
No. I was just pointing out Bernie's hand in the air when you said no more questions.
Okay, well, I think in that case, unless there's anything else, Frank,
No, nothing else.
by text. I think we're all doing it live anyway. So anyway, thank you again, Glenn. That was very interesting, and I think the debate that's followed has really added to it as well. So, and thank you, Mark, for the vote of thanks. Well, we're just going into admin matters now. I have before me the agenda for the meeting. Obviously, the minutes we don't do now. There are no membership applications. I think the biggest announcement I'm going to make is that we're actually going to have an opening of our building. On the 28th, the library is going to be open. It's going to be under fairly rigorous rules, which are defined as, are laid down for how we perform in these situations. Richard Brecken and Alan Shatton are going to be there to police these rules, but it's just going to be so good to get back into the building, and it's a sign of things getting back to normal. We don't expect a large number. That's why I think it's possible for the library to open. But sadly, of course, a Christmas party in December is not going to happen. We're very hopeful that in January we will have a social event back at 303 if the rules permit. But in December, we do have one thing. We're going to have another Zoom meeting. And the concept is that we have 3 items that are humorous, bit of fun. It's although we can't meet together and have a drink and be social, let's at least have 3 items that have got a touch of humor related to them. So we'll talk later about how that's going to be aggregated and submitted and gathered together by our great leader, Frank, who runs these meetings so well. And thank you again for that, Frank. But that's the plan for December, and that's on December the 17th. So 28th of November, library, 17th of December, philatelic meeting by Zoom, and hopefully a meeting on the 21st of January. So that's really all I've got the way of announcements. Just draw your attention yet again to the website, which continues to develop. A number of us are going to meet rated to the web coordination group at the end of January, and feedback would be much appreciated. I was speaking to one of our members who doesn't regularly attend meetings, and just said that they'd found that the website a great improvement and a great benefit to their collecting. So please have a good look at the website and feedback to us comments so that we can improve it and make it more useful for everyone. So beyond saying thank you, obviously, to Glen for the presentation, to Frank for making it all available, to guests from the US, Les, now must be 1 o'clock in the morning. God bless you for doing it. And Bernie from his 2 Zoom sessions of the day. Wonderful for everyone to join us. And thank you, and over and stay safe. Stay safe. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Take care. Thanks, Glenn.
All right.